Carnivore diet. It's a polarizing trend that's rapidly on the rise, and one that's sparking debates from dinner tables to social media spaces to the halls of academia.
So I've been sent Nick's videos many times, so I think it's time to dive into one of the biggest issues I have with this content, so buckle in, it gets juicy. Time school.
Myth: there isn't any evidence supporting a carnivore diet. There are actually several research articles on the carnivore diet, including a study out of Harvard that included 2,029 participants. And it found, now quoting, participants reported high levels of satisfaction and improvements in overall health, well-being, and various medical conditions. There were also 2 recent case series on a carnivore diet for inflammatory bowel disease and restrictive eating disorders. I'm pretty familiar with these. I wrote both of them. This is evidence, let's be clear, and the results, they're rather impressive.
So Nick did a video where he basically debunks 8 myths about the carnivore diet. The first one being that there isn't any evidence supporting a carnivore diet, to which he responds with multiple citations, including a study from Harvard. Now, before we dive into his citations, I just want to show you a clip he did on a call-out video to Lane Norton.
Now, this is a common influencer strategy. It's called citation bombing, where an influencer will drop a series of references, here PubMed IDs or PMIDs, because it appears intellectually rigorous. However, this citation bombing tactic is a gamble, because if others with large enough profiles go digging, one can end up with egg on their face.
That's a fantastic point, Nick. So to hold yourself to your own standards, why don't we actually go digging into your references? So his citation was this study on 2,029 adults who consumed a majority carnivore-style diet for over 6 months. As he stated, they did in fact report high levels of satisfaction and improvements in a variety of medical conditions. But if we look a little deeper, it becomes apparent that this wasn't a strong study at all. In fact, it's one of the most poorly designed observational studies I think I've ever seen in nutrition science. First of all, do you know where they recruited these people? On social media communities such as the World Carnivore Tribe, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, and so on. And their results are not actually objective results at all. This was all based on how these people felt and what they decided to report. They collected self-reported anthropometric and laboratory data. Did they have their medical records checked? No. Did they perform any blood tests, any body measurements? Did they assess their diet through validated food frequency questionnaires via 24-hour food recalls, weighted food diaries, serum or urinary biomarkers? Did they have any medical assessment to objectively check if they had improvements in their symptoms before or after the study? No to all of that. These things are very standard in nutrition cohort studies, yet not a single form of validation or objective assessment was conducted. In other words, you simply had to take their word for it. And not just that, but there's a clear case of selection bias. Part of the inclusion criteria for the study was that you had to have been on the carnivore diet for at least 6 months. But what about those who experienced negative health effects from the carnivore diet? Do you think they would have carried on the diet for more than 6 months? I don't know about you, but if I wasn't feeling good with brain fog, tinnitus, blood, muscle twitches, and absolute wrecking hair loss, I would have stopped long before 6 months. So you're basically only surveying those who felt better on the carnivore diet and not including the thousands of negative anecdotes from people all over the world. Oh, and it gets worse. They also didn't adjust for any major lifestyle habits like exercise, sleep, smoking, and so on. The authors clearly state that these findings must be interpreted cautiously in view of several major design limitations. Our survey assessed the perception of individuals following a carnivore diet and did not objectively assess diet, nutrient status, health-related outcomes, or confounding health-associated behaviors, and no physiological or biochemical measurements were obtained. The problem here is that Nick is more than happy to cite this study as legitimate or strong evidence in not just one video, in multiple videos repeatedly when it's objectively not. Where is his analysis of this social media study? Where is his 10-minute critique? In fact, all I've seen him say is that this study has limitations. Okay, so does every study in the world. Why didn't he mention any of the very significant points I brought up earlier? Yet, when he's critiquing a far stronger study, like he did on a post recently looking at dark chocolate intake and the risk of type 2 diabetes, he's the first one to point out all of the flaws and limitations in it. Bear in mind, this study included hundreds of thousands of participants over 3 cohorts, followed people up over time, where they actually did adjust for confounding variables, they did take objective assessment measurements, they did use validated food frequency questionnaires, and they did not exclude people with diabetes that had a worsening in their disease. Despite being so much stronger in his methodology than his own citation, he's still happy to point out all of the flaws and cast doubt on his conclusions. We don't even need to dive into his other 2 citations, which are literally case reports on 10 individuals, once again recruited from social media surveys who happen to experience benefit with their inflammatory bowel disease. The other article is literally hand-picked positive anecdotes on 3 people with eating disorders. He goes on in the video to say that there are thousands of powerful human stories showing real benefit from real people on a carnivore diet, as further evidence that a carnivore diet could be a metabolic intervention for a variety of medical conditions. But once again, what about the thousands of people who suffer real harm and negative experiences from the carnivore diet? This level of evidence is so far down the hierarchy of evidence, anyone with any knowledge of research knows that it's not reliable. For every positive anecdote that exists, you can find a severely negative one. Just look to carnivore subreddits or the carnivore cringe page, for example. Here's just one example I mentioned earlier out of thousands you can find. They've been carnivore for 5 months, but they're not feeling good. They have brain fog, tinnitus, there's blood when brushing their teeth, muscle twitches, weakness, absolute wrecking hair loss. They've lost half of their hair density in the 5 months of going carnivore. They also feel weak, tired, lacking in cognitive ability, and they don't have any good days anymore. Nick, these are real people with real negative experiences. Where are your tons of videos highlighting negative anecdotes? So anyone who tries to claim that anecdotes are good evidence of something, they're not worth listening to. So overall, this is a classic case of carnivore bias here. He illustrates no consistent epistemic standard. If he was being honest with himself, he would and should say that the evidence supporting the carnivore diet for any disease state or the general population is utterly garbage. And with the mountains and mountains of strong prospective cohort studies with and without substitution analyses and the long-term randomized control trials, all pointing to plant-predominant dietary patterns like the Mediterranean diet, pescatarian diet, veggie or vegan diet, being optimal for long-term health for the general population. It's simply outrageous to try and claim otherwise. So, to follow his own advice about watching out for citation bombing, it appears that Nick has indeed ended up with egg on his face. Class is missed.